with me if I hit the floor. Somebody try to catch
touch that a little bit too.
But anyway, I'm Jim Farmer. I own Castaway Bait and Tackle, and I've been fishing for stripers for about 35 years now, I guess. Not all of it's been here in Georgia. I started fishing for stripers out in California way back in the late 70s, early 80s, and kind of worked my way over here. But I did spend quite a few years out in California fishing the lakes and the rivers and the aqueducts and all that stuff for stripers out there. And finally, after being in the Navy for quite a few years, they finally moved me here, and I started fishing Lake Lanier for stripers. I believe it was about 96, 97, and I've been fishing for them since. My deal is trolling. I like to troll, so that's what I'm going to talk to you guys about a little bit tonight, is trolling Leadcore on Lake Lanier, and some of the things that I've learned over the years. I've been trolling it for quite a few years now, and kind of learned a few things. So I'm just going to pass along some of the stuff that I've learned, and I'm going to kind of, this is a new slideshow I've got here, so we're going to kind of follow along with that. That kind of keeps me on the right track here, if I can read what I'm doing. But what I'm going to cover tonight is I'm going to cover a little bit on preparations, location, presentation of your bait when you're using Leadcore and downriggers, some of my tactics that I use and other people's tactics too, and then landing the fish. So we're gonna cover all that. But first, before we start talking about tactics and going to the lake and fishing and all that stuff, one thing I want to talk about is your preparations and your tackle, and I think that's really, really important before you even put your first jig in the water. To me, I mean, we got any golfers in here? Anybody golf? Besides me, you got a couple. Well, one thing about golfing is when you step up to the tee box, there's probably about 10 or 15 things going through your mind to hit the golf ball. You got to set up before you actually swing, you know. Well, it's kind of the same way with this. As far as I'm concerned, before I put my tackle in the water, I want to make sure that everything looks good. I'm going to show you guys something here. A lot of times I'm using this kind of tackle here where I've got a lead head and a plastic body, and a lot of guys use stuff like that if they can for trolling. I started using it years ago. Now, a lot of guys use just one piece a lot, but I use two pieces. But the trick to this is with any bait that you're trolling with, at the speed you're trolling, whether it be 2 or 3 miles an hour, you want to have a good presentation. You don't want your bait to run sideways, making loops or anything like that, because really a fish probably isn't going to bite that. So you want it as straight as you can. And man, if there was anything that I could preach about success of Leadcore and the type of baits and stuff like that, it's trying to keep a straight line with this hook on the bait. I mean, when you run it through there, I like to run it through in a nice straight line to where when it comes out just perfectly like that. So when you're pulling it through the water, it's not going to run sideways like that, or it's not going to be crooked and doing loops. So before I even hit the water, the first thing I do is I make sure that my baits are in a straight line and they look good. And the second thing I do is I check my line. I use 17-pound Guess fluorocarbon line, 30 feet of it on the Leadcore. And before I put it in the water, I'm always checking like the last 10 feet or something like that down to the jig, because Leadcore gets scratched up real easy, and when it gets scratched up, why, it doesn't work as well. So another thing that I check my bait, I check my Leadcore line, I make sure it's not, you know, got nicks in it and stuff like that. I check my drag, because when you're using Leadcore, drag's kind of important. It's not one of them things that you want to cinch down all the way and drag the fish up, but you want to have a little bit of drag, so that's another thing I check. So I check my tackle, I check my line, and I check my drag before it even goes in the water. So once I do that, like on Lake Lanier, a lot of times I'll use these kind of paddle tails, but I also use a lot of curl tails too, like what's in the picture there. And I color a lot of them. Believe it or not, these stripers, you know, one day they'll bite one color real good, and the next day they'll leave it alone. there's times where I could run this through stripers and they wouldn't touch it, and other times they'll jump on it right away. But I use all kinds of different colors. Probably the 4 best colors on Lake Lanier is this color right here, a plain white color, blue and white color, and pink and white. If I had to use 4 colors, that would be the 4 that I would choose. So we got all kinds of colors up there, and I do try all kinds of different colors. And believe it or not, these stripers bite on some of the funniest stuff sometimes. But once again, I use paddle tails a lot. I use curl tails a lot. And I also use fluke baits too. When I first started trolling Leadcore, about all I used was Captain Max bucktails, and I put like a green fluke on them. Man, we used to kill them that way. We had a lot of fun catching them on those jigs, and it's kind of the way I learned to use the Leadcore with the jigs. But then I started kind of making my own, so Captain Max kind of went out the window. But I mean, that's just a plain bucktail with curl tail or a paddle tail or a fluke on it is a good one to use for trolling Leadcore too. Let's go ahead and go on here. As far as locations go, one thing I wanted to talk about in location is where you find the fish year after year. And you don't always find them in the same place. I tell you guys, man, you guys probably know as well as I do, these fish move around like nomads. You might find them in one place one day and they might be gone the next. And I think a lot of that has to do with our rain, the water levels in the lake, how much water they're moving through the lake. If you take like last year, the lake was full, and really we didn't have a real good thermocline set up. And I don't know about you guys, but I didn't do that good with Leadcore last year. It didn't really help me all that much. We did catch a lot of fish on it, but I could tell the bite was kind of off from what it usually is. So we didn't catch the numbers that we usually catch. I mean, the fish were there, they just weren't set up to bite the Leadcore. And I think part of the problem with last year was if you guys remember, we got a lot of rain last summer. And when you get a lot of rain on the lake, well, a lot of time that cold water from the rain saturates through the lake, and it kind of messes up the thermocline a little bit, so you don't have a good solid thermocline. And another thing I was seeing last year, we should have these spots of thermocline. Some of it would dry up and some of it would stay there, but the stripers tend to stay inside that. And last year, since there was so much rain, you had these different areas of thermocline around the lake that the stripers were in. So if you could find those areas, you could probably find some good stripers on Leadcore. The problem was there was a lot of those areas and the stripers were kind of spread out and stuff like that. So they were really harder to find. But yeah, I think we're going to have the same kind of year this year. I mean, it's shaping up to be the same kind of summer. It's wet, you know, so I think that's going to be what we're looking at. Again, I don't expect it to be a banner year for Leadcore, but you know, we'll do some catching on the Leadcore. But river channels, I'll tell you guys, as far as location and looking for the fish, a good place to start is on the south end, in the river channel or the creeks that come into the river channel. A couple good places, a couple good creeks that I know of down there is Shoal Creek. The creek channel in Shoal Creek runs into the river channel, and right there there's a little intersection. That's a good place to look, because stripers, what they tend to do is when they're traveling, they'll travel in the river channel or the creek channels, and then they'll kind of spread out away from them. So I'm always looking in the creek channels, deeper areas, over 100 feet of water, and in the river channel and the humps around the river channel. But I'm always searching for deeper water in July and in August. So that's kind of some of the places I find them. Also the humps right off the river channel, like the young deer humps. That's a good place to look too. I've always found stripers around those humps. They're not going to be in the same spot all the time, but they kind of move around them young deer humps. So if you do enough traveling around them humps, you could probably find a striper or two there. That's another good place. And I noticed that last year the stripers stayed a little further north than they had in previous years, and I think it's because of all the rain and the thermocline in different places. But we found a lot of fish up north by Three Sisters, even go further than that in late July and August in little pockets of thermocline, places that we wouldn't normally find them in July and August. Usually they're on the south end. So, you know, it's not all south end in July and August. I mean, the way things are shaping up, you could probably drive all the way to Brown's Bridge and find nicer stripers in July and August this year. But, you know, that's some of the locations I look. And I tell you guys, I'll tell you another thing that I do with locations. I'll go from location to location to location to location, and sometimes there won't be any fish in any of those locations, but I'll keep coming back. I might check the same location like 3, 4, 5 times a day, and at some point, those stripers will probably show up. But if, let's say you had 5 different places you were checking, during the course of the day, the stripers would come out, come up, and show up in them places. So I guess the point is, if you just check a place and there's nothing there, don't rule it out 2 hours later, because these fish are moving around a lot. They're trying to find bait. They're trying to find better water. So if you find some locations where you found fish in the past, I keep going there and I keep checking it, because chances are they're going to be there again. You just have to kind of wait them out. And a lot of times I'll start out at, say, 10 o'clock in the morning and start checking places on the south end. And, you know, you just think there's not going to be any stripers anywhere. And then all of a sudden you'll see them start coming up out of the trees. You know, you'll see a few above the trees here, then there'll be more, and then there'll be more. I'm pretty sure that's where the stripers are at until they get ready to eat, when they're in deeper waters or way down in them trees, because it's like every time they show up right above the trees. So I got to think they were down in them. But anyway, there's a lot of good places to check. Just make sure you're checking in 100 feet or more of water. And on the south end in late July and in August, you're probably going to run across some stripers. They're also going to keep schooling up. A lot of times they're scattered and in different smaller schools, but as summer progresses, they're going to keep getting together, and they're going to keep getting together until they're in some huge schools by, say, the end of August or something like that. But as far as locations, that's kind of what I do. There's no secrets to what I do. I probably got about 300 marks on my GPS from Browns Bridge south that I found stripers in the summertime. So they could show up anywhere. I mean, you know, you just have to find them. The easiest way is to find a couple guides and just remember where they went. But anyway, nah, man, I like finding my own fish. I don't like to chase guides around, man. Because I tell you something about finding fish, man. If you find it by yourself, they're your fish until you tell somebody or somebody sees you. But that's kind of the way I like to do it. I like to kind of hunt my own fish, and if somebody sees me catch one, that's fine. I really don't care, but I don't go chasing around guides or anything like that. I might make a mental note of where they're fishing and go back when they ain't there, but I don't chase them around. But anyway, when you start trolling Leadcore, how many guys have trolled Leadcore in here? Does anybody troll Leadcore? Is everybody kind of familiar with Leadcore and how it works and what it's made of? We all got a pretty good idea. Well, I got some stuff over here in case you want to look. But anyway, when I start trolling this stuff, if I don't really know what they're hitting, like I know right now they're hitting these, but if I didn't know, what I'm going to do is I'm going to vary a bunch of stuff. I'm going to vary the size of my baits until I figure out what size they're hitting. And in early July, it can go anywhere from 4 inches all the way up bigger than this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put out different sizes until I figure out what they're hitting. I'm also going to try different depths too. And when I find a school of fish that I want to work with the Leadcore, I'm going to try the easiest and the straightest approach first. If I mark some fish, I'm just going to go through them. I'm not going to speed up. I'm not going to slow down. I'm just going to kind of idle through them as quiet and as easy as I can to see if they'll hit that way. You know, a lot of times when you first pass through them, on your first pass, you'll hammer one just right away. But after you hammer that one, then they start getting a little bit nervous. So you might run through them again from, say, a different direction, which I like to do too. Let's say that I ran through fish from one direction, probably not going to run through them from that direction again unless I feel like I can get them again. I'm probably going to come at them from another direction and try it that way too. So if I found a school of fish, if you actually looked at my GPS and looked at my tracks, you'd probably see something that looks like a flower, because I'm just going back and forth and doing figure eights and going back through them that way from different directions. But after a while, they're probably not going to buy into the straight approach anymore. So that's when I start janking them a little bit. I got to start tricking them, because once you catch one or two on this and they see this 3 or 4 times, they're done with it. They ain't going to fool with it anymore. They're just going to watch it go by every time. So I got to do something different. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start doing crazy Ivan, speeding up and slowing down. I'm going to start burying some things. I might even change baits out. I mean, if I feel like they ain't going to hit this anymore, I get a bucktail to put on there. I'll try something a different size that don't look anything like this, because they already know this is bad. So I'm going to put a bucktail or something like that on there. Try that. I'm going to try different approaches. I'm going to try speeding up, slowing down. I'm going to stop whenever I think the baits are over them and things like that. But there's all kinds of different things you can do. Once these stripers get in tune with just running a straight bait, then you got to put some action on it. And with Leadcore's running like 200, 175 to 300 feet behind the boat. And whenever you're trying to put action on this stuff, it's not like instantaneous. You have to like speed up and slow down and turn. And actually what it does is it puts a lot of waves in your Leadcore. It's not like when you like turn left, why all of a sudden your jig's just going to go off to the left, because it's like 200 feet behind you. So it's like pulling a big trailer. I mean, it takes a while. So basically what you're doing is you're putting a wave in that Leadcore. And at some point that wave's going to work its way out to the end where the jig is, and that's going to provide the action. So one thing you want to do is get started with your action early, because it takes it a little while to get out there. Now speeding up and slowing down, your jig's going to speed up and slow down as you speed up and slow down, pretty instantaneous. But what happens when you speed up and slow down is, let's say that I hammered it. This jig's going to go up, and I back it off and maybe drop it into neutral. Well, the jig's going to start going down. So what you want to do is you want to get that thing going like that maybe, and maybe moving around to the side. But you got to be putting some action on it. So another thing that's really, really important, and it's probably just important as getting this bait straight, and it's called dead reckoning. When you're pulling baits, when you're pulling Leadcore and it's 200 to 300 feet behind the boat, by the time your Leadcore bait gets to that fish, after you've seen it on the graph, it's a little while. And if you're fighting wind, say you got a side slip wind or something like that, it's going to blow you off the mark. You're going to start getting blown sideways. By the time this gets to the fish, you're not anywhere close to the fish anymore. So what I use is what we call dead reckoning. Let's say that I'm cruising along and I mark some fish. Let's say that my rule is if I find more than 6 fish on the graph, I'm probably going to fish it if I haven't got anything down. But let's say that I see fish on the graph and I got the Leadcore out. As soon as I see those fish, I'm going to make an imaginary line in front of me, and I'm going to make it in back of me. And so I know where I got to go to keep those jigs on those fish. Now, I'll do crazy Ivans. You guys have seen me do crazy Ivans. But I always remember that straight line. If I have to, I'll look at a dock across the lake, and I'll keep pointed at that dock. I might go left and I might go right, and I might slow down and speed up. But I'm always going to point my boat at that dock. And hopefully, if I did my dead reckoning right, those lures are going to be right where those fish were when you seen them. But that's one thing that a lot of people don't understand is it takes quite a few seconds for those jigs to get those fish that you just seen on the graph. On my graph, it's the complete length of the graph. And so what I want to do is it's going to be a while, so I just want to make that imaginary line in my head. Look back behind me, look in front of me, and stay on that line. No matter what happens, when your jigs get to that area where you mark those fish, you want to be on that line. I know a lot of you guys have seen the video on GON of last weekend, me catching the fish on the Leadcore, but I'm sure there's some of you that haven't. So I'm going to show you kind of a little bit about what I'm talking about now in a couple videos, hopefully, if we if we can get them. This one here is I'm talking about the setup.
Farmer here, we're on the south end of the lake. It's Saturday morning, the 28th of June. Water temperature, as you can see, is getting up to be about 80.
You see trees here. We're at 100 feet of water.
But I wanted to show you guys here real quick what I'm looking for. There's some stripers right there.
These are stripers here and here. They're suspended above the trees.
100 feet of water, so that's kind of what we're looking for.
This was right outside the mouth of Ball Ridge. There's like a whole forest out there, and this is just coming into it. You can see the tree lines there.
Now we've got out Leadcore on a 9-foot rod on the right, Leadcore 9-foot rod on the left. We've got one short one. One's on the Leadcore on the right and left. They're pulling good sized bait. 2-ounce jigs, 2-ounce shad head jigs with 6-7-inch bodies, and then we've got a smaller jig on the center one here. So we're just now pulling the jigs through the fish, and we're going to see if we can get a place to bite here.
Now I've got long rods. That rod that's laying over there is 9 foot 6 inches long, and I've got 2 of those, one out on each side. So I got a pretty good spread, which allows me to run a bait straight down the center. So what I do is, the ones on the left and right, the one on the left, I'll run that back 175 or 200, the one on the right 250, and the one on the center, I always run that shorter. I run that 150 to 175. If a fish gets on there and he moves left or right, he's going to move above the other 2, and I can pretty much handle him on that center one. But I'll run that center one. And a lot of times your stripers, they won't hit that one that's back 250, 300 feet. They'll hit the short one. We've caught so many fish running a short Leadcore with our long Leadcore. So it just depends on what they want. This particular day, we caught them at 175, we caught them at 200, and we caught them at 250. They were just at different depths. So that's the way we caught them on this particular day. And as far as tactics are going, let's do that next video. This is what I mean about Crazy Ivans. When I mark the fish, I kind of go into action, and it kind of shows what I did here.
Stripers feeding on a big cloud of bait here.
That's a big school of bluebacks right there, by the way.
They're around it. There was some back over this way.
The stripers are in the bluebacks.
Through them here in just a second. See if we can't get one of these guys off this school of bait here. There's more bait. Another big cloud of bait. We just kind of keep an eye on them. Nice bunch of stripers around it, all in it here.
So these stripers, what they're doing is they're just spinning around these bait balls.
Through them here.
They're not really attacking it, they're just waiting. They're opportunists. They're waiting for something to come by.
Between 25 and 30 feet in depth right now, so we're kind of running right over the tops. We've got our baits running through them. So with all these stripers here, we should be able to pick up at least one coming through here. Let's see if we can get one here. Here we go. I'm going to do a couple Crazy Ivans here.
This is Crazy Ivans. I'm going back and forth.
Back and forth a little bit. We're going to gas it up.
I gunned it. I gassed it, and the jig's coming up.
Okay.
Now the jig's falling back down.
A little bit of action. I want to take our baits through these fish with it. And see there, fish on.
So, see,
okay, babe, look at the camera.
Yep. That's good. Alright. See, we were just cruising straight through them, but man, these fish weren't doing anything. They were really starting to make me mad, because you guys don't get to see the takes that don't make it to YouTube, man. But this took 4 tries. I'll admit to you, man. We kept going through them. And I turned that on, and then finally it was like, dang, man, I can't get them. So on the 4th try, we got them. But it took me that long to figure out, you know what, these fish don't want this just driving straight through. I got to do some Crazy Ivans and get all stupid with this stuff. So anyway, that's what I did with that one. So sometimes, yes, Dan?
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
You said you like to see 5 to 6 fish on the string before you set up.
Yeah.
Okay. What would determine if you're going to set up? Are you talking about 5 or 6 screen fish full screen, 5 or 6 fish half screen?
No, full screen.
Okay.
Yeah, I always run full screen because I got a separate GPS unit. So yeah, full screen. If I see,
I'm saying across the whole screen, if you see 6 fish, you're setting up.
yeah. If I see 6 fish, that's a quorum. That's a gang to me. Somebody's gonna eat. So yeah, they'll be fighting. If there's 6 of them, somebody's gonna eat. But anyway, there's another thing I want to talk to you about besides serpentining or crazy Ivans, whatever you want to call it. I got another video here called Jigging and Profiling, and hopefully if we've got some Wi-Fi, we can get that. But if it don't work, if you're doing crazy Ivans and it ain't working, why there's something else you can do. And this is an old trick that I used from way back when, and we're going to see if the video works for this. This is called Jigging and Profiling.
We've got a pretty good amount of stripers here. We've been out here about 20-30 minutes. Really haven't got any of these guys to hit, so we're going to have to work them a little bit. I'm going to start jigging this lead core here. Sometimes when I get like this, if you jig your lead core, well, you can get 1 or 2. So let's jig a little lead core.
So the boat's not running.
So that's all it took.
Okay. So trolling.
So what I did was I just grabbed a rod out of the rod holder and I started pulling like that, man. I mean, just make that thing pull it up, pull like that. You know, but if they're not biting, you can do that. If it doesn't work on anything else, well, just grab that rod out of there and start pulling on it. What you get when you jig your lead core. We'll just look at this fish real quick. How about that?
Nice.
Jig your lead core. That's good. But this same day, it's got our second striper on. After I caught 2 or 3 stripers, they quit biting the stuff. And so what I did was, I don't know why, I think one of the stripers I caught on here like ate the paddle tail off the jig. So I just said to heck with it and threw the jig back out there. Man, I got hammered right away. So then I pulled all the paddle tails and all the trailers. And I was catching them left and right on bucktails that big. So, you know, they got tired of all this big stuff. I just threw the little stuff at them and fooled them again. That was good for 5 more. So, anyway, that was jigging and profiling. And by profiling, I mean profiling your bait. If you don't feel like they're going to eat the big stuff, try the small stuff on them. If they're not eating anything and you haven't pulled your rod out of the rod holder, pull that sucker out and start jerking on it. That's jigging, and sometimes that works. So that's just one of those things that you can do to help out. Yeah, I got one more here. This was a kind of a different scenario, but this one's called dinner time. But I wanted to kind of show you what these stripers were doing.
One of them hunter packs right here.
And stop it right there if you can, bud.
Stripers around it.
This is what I call a hunter pack of stripers. I don't know if you guys have seen this or not. It happens sometimes on Lake Lanier. These stripers right here are probably between 3 and 5 pounds, and they'll travel in these little groups. And I call them hunter packs because what they do is they go into a school of bait. You can't really see it there, but they're just terrorizing a school of bait, a small school of bait. And what they do is they go in and they terrorize a school of bait, and then out here, you can't really see them until we come further, but out here you got what we call lurkers, which are the bigger stripers. Smaller stripers like that, these hunter they do all the work. They bust the bait schools up, and then the bigger ones are like lurkers. That's why Leadcore works so good with just one single bait. A lot of times these lurkers are just waiting for something that the young guys busted up so they can eat it. They're just sitting there waiting for something to come running by them. I mean, they're just like, they're like us in the fact that they get lazy too when they get bigger, fatter, and all that. Well, they don't feel like chasing stuff. So you got all these young bucks right here. They're doing the work for them, and they're just like hanging out and just waiting for these guys to scatter the bait. You can go ahead and play it. But you'll see this, and these are all young fish.
So all the workers can come and eat it.
Let's see,
It's like dinner time. Let's see how long it takes to get one of these guys.
that's a good thing. But,
Yeah, these stripers.
you can go ahead and show it now.
Oh, Jeff.
Yeah. This was a pretty good one.
And that one.
But anyway, that's something that I saw in the lake too. Is a lot of these bigger stripers that you catch on Leadcore and stuff, they're not doing a lot of work. What they're doing is they're just waiting on the younger ones to bust up the bait, and that's why single bucktail, single trolling, Leadcore trolling works good, downriggers and stuff like that, because they're in tune to looking for single baits. They're not looking for bunches. They're just looking for the big one to run by them so they can eat it. But I better wrap it up here before too long. But anybody use downriggers? Are you guys like down? I know Chris is, and yeah, Alex, Bill. I don't know about you guys, but I haven't been using downriggers a whole bunch over the last 2 years. I didn't want to talk too much about it because I'll be honest with you guys, I'm probably wrong about this. It just may be me, but the last 2 years I've used my downriggers, I found that sometimes it scares the fish. It's no kidding. It might be my. I'm not using any heavy braid or anything like that. I'm still using wire, and it might be the humming from the wire. But I don't know about y'all, but it seems like sometimes when I drop my downrigger, the fish just get lockjaw. So I'm half scared to put it down these days. But I have caught a lot of fish in the past on downriggers. I mean, you can look at some of my older videos, and there wasn't a year that went by that I didn't catch a bunch of fish on a downrigger. And it could be downrigger heaven this year. I really don't know. But if you've never experienced fishing with a downrigger, you do a little research, and something that's good about the downrigger that I found was a lot better than Leadcore was when you're fighting downrigger fish, you know, you're not fighting Leadcore too, you're just fighting the fish. And a lot of times when you get them on downriggers in the summertime, it's a real blast. So definitely, if you've never thought about using a downrigger, they do work on Lake Lanier, and I've caught plenty of fish on them, and I'm sure Alex, you and Chris, you guys have caught plenty, so it's worth giving it a try. But just a couple things about downriggers on Lake Lanier. You know, you got to keep moving, vary everything. I vary bait size, I vary the depth, I vary the speed, and all that. But anyway, one last thing I want to talk to you guys about, and then I'll get out of here. But when you catch a fish, when you hook a fish, what I like to do, and you can see it in my videos, almost all my videos have the same thing. When Lisa and I hook a fish, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start turning. If there's deeper water around, I'm going to start turning into deeper water. And a couple reasons why I do that. If you just went straight when you hook a striper with your boat on Leadcore, you're going to jerk that fish right out of the thermocline, and he's going to be up on the surface in a matter of 5 to 10 seconds. But if you turn, that gives the fish just a little bit of slack, and he's got a better chance of staying down there in that thermocline while you're turning. So you're not actually pulling the fish out of the thermocline, you're giving the fish a little bit by turning back into it. And you're letting him kind of stay down where he lives until he gets closer to the boat. I've done this hundreds of times where I've caught a fish and went straight, and every time that striper is going to come out of the thermocline and come right to the top. And if I turn into them, they seem to want to stay down longer. I'm giving them more slack. I'm not jerking them out of the thermocline. So I'm letting them have that little bit of extra thermocline while I turn into them. All you got to do is just keep line tight, man. You don't have to like jerk, pull, haul, you know, any of that stuff. Just keep pressure on the fish until you can get the boat closer to the fish as quickly as possible, and then get him up, get him photographed or whatever you do with him, and get him back in the water, because this time of year, these fish get really, really stressed. You can usually tell when a fish is stressed because he loses that iridescent color. That's the first thing that goes when he gets stressed, is you no longer see that iridescent side on him. He loses that color, that means he's stressed. And a lot of times in late July and August, you see a lot of fish like that. So, you know, there's a chance of getting out here, whether you're using live bait or whether you're trolling, Leadcore, downriggers, I don't care what it is. There's a chance you could run into a lot of stripers, and you could catch a lot of stripers. And if you didn't know what you were doing, you could do a lot of damage too. I mean, last year I saw a lot of floaters, and man, nobody wants to see any dead fish floating around the lake. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, you know, you have an opportunity to catch some big numbers of fish during the summer because obviously they're a lot more bunched up. You know, it's like shooting fish in a barrel sometimes. But the only thing that I ask is use a little common sense, you know. I mean, if the fish are floating, if you see that they don't have that iridescent color on them, if you've got some floaters, it might be a good time to move on, you know. It might be a time to find another place to fish or something like that because these fish do go through a lot of stress. So that's the only thing that I recommend is just using, you know, a little bit of common sense. But I think that's it. If you guys got any questions for me, like, feel free to shoot away. So
On your Leadcore, 1727, what's...
Yeah, the whole setup with the Leadcore is 27-pound test on the Leadcore. I put 100 pounds of backing before I put my Leadcore on there, maybe 100 feet at 30-pound test, depending on what your reel can hold. Then you're going to put your Leadcore on there. Most of it's 10 colors, 300 feet, 100 yards, you know, but you can get it in 200-yard spools. You have to do a little looking, but you can get more than 100 yards if you, I think Portland sells a 200-yard spool, and if you can get more than 100 yards on a reel, well, that's good too. And then what I do is typically I use 17-pound XPS Bass Pro fluorocarbon, 30 feet of it. The way I connect the two is I just use like a heavy-duty, one of them little tiny power swivels that'll go through the guide on your reel. But I'm usually using about 30 feet of 17-pound test fluorocarbon. And I swear by XPS. You guys may use something different. There's all kinds of different fluorocarbons out there. But I can only tell you what I use. And I use Bass Pro XPS 17-pound test fluorocarbon. If I'm using downriggers, I might up that a little bit because sometimes you get a bigger fish. But that's what I'm using, Joe. I guess that covers everything. How about you?
I know you vary your speed, especially when you see fish. What is your average speed before you start doing that?
About 2.5, whatever I can get. I mean, as slow as I can get back down to idle. So usually I'm just at idle. If I can start getting into some fish, I might speed it up. Now I'll tell you guys this. Last year I caught my fastest striper, which was 6 miles an hour. So I've caught them, you know, usually when I'm going from one spot to another spot, I'll goose it, man. I'll haul butt with my stuff dragging out the back. But I'm going to goose it up, and I'm going to go from one spot to another spot at 5 or 6 miles an hour. I'm not going to reel in all my stuff and then drive over here and throw it all back out. I'm just going to leave it all out. The heck with it. I got all day. You know, just go with it. But generally when I'm just targeting fish, anywhere from 2, 2.5, 3, something like that. Bill?
Do you ever try any little rattle chambers or any of that stuff by poking them into the baits to give the bait a little noise?
Yeah. On the paddle tails, man, that's a good thing you brought that up, Bill. I was thinking about that earlier. I got some rattles about 3 weeks ago, and they're the kind that have a little point on them. And if you use them if you're using paddle tails, those little suckers are just perfect for shoving in the back end of that paddle tail. Just bury it in the plastic. Because with that little paddle tail, it's going like that, going in the water, and that little rattle is just going off in there. I got 2 different kinds. I got like a small one and a bigger one. And paddle tails, those would be great. Good question, Bill. Anybody else? Sir?
Do you mind saying, you know, how much the planers are?
How much are they? I'm cutting you guys a special deal tonight. I've never done this before. You guys are going to get them for $35 if you want.
And I haven't seen, you know, made out of this styrofoam material. You like that?
Yeah. I like that. It floats really good. That was kind of, well, I tell you what, that planer board, you know, a lot of my stuff that I make come from all you guys, man. it's not like it's any secret that I'm going to take what one of you guys tell me and put it somewhere, but one of the striper fishermen came up with that idea for the planer boards. I just put it on paper and started making it. But, you know, I listen to a lot of you guys, and, you know, I don't get to talk to you a lot, but I'm always listening to what you guys are saying and writing and things like that, so I'm always trying to keep one step ahead of guys.
Why don't you tell us how you
Right. Oh, Leadcore?
Yeah. You take the wire out.
Nah.
How do you do it?
No, I don't do anything. Man, people ask me about it. Some people take the lead out of it and just use the, what is it, Dacron or whatever it is that you use. But no, I don't do anything. Man, this Leadcore is so forgiving. You can tie a half inch in that stuff with the lead in it. I've never had it break, man. I've never taken the lead out, especially Dacron. I just shoved it through the hole and tied a little knot in it that I made sure would go through your line guide of your reel. But yeah, basically what it is just a cinch knot that's been twisted like 3 times and pulled down. It ain't come out of anything. Anybody else? Oh, well, that's all I got.
Good job, my man.
Thank you, Jim.
Appreciate it.
Public audience further, are there any guests